Well, hello there and welcome to this Evolve Alliance Provider Member Showcase interview. I am delighted today to be joined by the head of IOOF Alliances, Andy Marshall. Andy, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And we love having you on board. Now, today we are drilling deep into the offer that IOOF Alliances provide for their members. Andy, you're very welcome to join us in the Evolve Alliance as a provider member. Now, I know that a lot of advisors would be familiar with the brand of IOOF, but how about we kick things off with you sharing a little bit more about the brand, about the company, and specifically what you do in the Alliances section.
Okay, well, IOOF has been in Australia operating for well over 175 years and has this great background of helping the everyday Australian. For alliances, and this is really the field that helps self-licensed businesses evolve, there's been a long history there as well beyond 20 years, but in its current form, Alliances really formed in late 2015 as a menu of services. Now, I came on board in 2017 and it really did need a bit of a refresh, and we wanted to be member-led, member-directed. So after consulting with the members and listening to what they valued, we enhanced the offer in 2018, which then led to a relaunch, if you like, in July 2019. And that's really the genesis of the current contemporary offer that you see today.
Fantastic. So you deliver licensee services. One of the questions that we love asking our providers is, what are the problems that you're solving for advisors?
Well, particularly in the self-licensed area, if we just park actually getting your license to start with, because we do help with that. But it's about compliance, interpretation, and implementation. So there's so much regulatory change. And as a business owner, as an AFSL operator, there's so much to keep up with. And most of our members will say, we want it interpreted and applied to what that means for us as a boutique. So that's a big part of what we do. So in terms of a problem that we solve, absolutely, that's one: compliance, interpretation, and implementation. The other one is a really broad area, and it's about best practice client engagement. And as you and I know, that is a huge bucket to dive into. And that can be anything from best practice conversations to the types of technology that people use. So we are looked at as a bit of a filter to bring best practice ideas to the collective membership, but also work through in peer group forums and look at each individual business on its own merits about what's going to suit them. So we really get to facilitate best practice ideas across the community to have amazing business outcomes for their business and the types of clients that they deal with.
Oh, that is absolute music to my ears, because it's exactly what we do here at Alexa too. The whole outcome being better service delivery to clients and better business as a result. So I'd like to drill in a little bit more into the compliance side of things first. When you say provide outsourced compliance services, what are we talking specifically there?
So there's two layers. There's the advisor compliance. So everyone would be familiar with an advice audit. So what's the quality of the advice that's actually leaving the building? Yeah. And the layer above that is the AFSL compliance. So that's the monitoring and supervision, but also making sure the AFSL is across all of its responsibilities to operate the license. So we operate in a dual space. We're offering that governance service for the AFSL. So that's got a lot to do with the policies and the procedures that run the AFSL. Simply put, it's making sure the responsible managers of the AFSL know what they need to know, when they need to know it, and what they need to do. And then the second layer that really does tie into that is, well, let's talk about the advice. How do you want that advice to look and feel? And let's make sure that we're auditing it in the way that ASIC's view of the world means that this AFSL and the advice that's leaving the AFSL is in keeping with what ASIC's expecting.
Great. Now, I've got so many questions in that space there. So when we're talking about advisor audit, interestingly, you know, we work with a lot of firms who are self-licensed, and they come out of the licensee space being, you know, having a requirement to do a set number of files to be audited every year, and then they're quite surprised at the flexibility when they get their own license. How often do you recommend that firms, you know, let's say it's a firm that has multiple advisors, some of whom are not the RM, because sometimes we see different behaviours when you're the RM or you're not. So where it is a bigger firm that has advisors that are not directors or they're not RM, how frequently do you suggest that they be audited?
That's a really interesting question, because you're right, they're moving from an environment where potentially they've been having 5 or more file audits per year.
Yeah.
And they're moving into an environment where 1 or 2 might be really appropriate. But the degree to which it's appropriate is to what degree advice is a discussion, and a live everyday discussion in the business. And so what we reflect on is that in a boutique, and in say a single office boutique, 4 or 5 advisors, we know advice is being discussed on a daily basis. It's top of mind. People are sharing ideas. And so the way that we formalize that is to say, let's talk about advice. Let's regiment it in terms of, let's set a quarterly compliance committee meeting where we do talk about advice, and we bring a file into that discussion. And unlike randomly picking a file, we'll be saying, let's really get into a meaty piece of advice. Bring us your most difficult file, the one that caused you challenges when you were writing the piece of advice that led to the most discussion. Let's discuss that one. And then it becomes a really collaborative, consultative approach, and everyone gets to learn about it. Everyone gets excited about it.
Right.
Get excited by compliance. And that's the fascinating transition I see people shift from ticking a box to really discussing advice.
Yeah, and that is a massive distinction, I think, Andy, because it's, like you say, it's not ticking the box. It's not saying, have you filled in the form in the right areas? Have you put your disclosures in the document? You're saying that it's going one step beyond that. I'm guessing you do check that stuff too, but then it goes to the quality of the advice and the reasonableness or the appropriateness of the strategies provided.
And the conciseness of it as well. You know, we want to look at that. The idea of the advice that meets these clients' goals is put to the client really succinctly. So a lot of the collaboration in looking at a piece of advice is, you don't need to put that in there. You know, that definitely needs to be in there.
That. Oh my goodness.
And it makes a lot of sense, because, you know, clear and concise is the objective. You want the client to really understand that piece of advice and really engaged with it. And so the objective for a boutique AFSL can be that you get real clarity in the way that you're delivering advice.
Fantastic. And so is it flexible for the firm so you have a quarterly compliance meeting? Do they have flexibility to then say, we want you to do more or less individual advisor audits?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So if people want to interrogate their advice on a more regular basis, absolutely welcome that. You know, it is good practice. It's great to, you know, if you want to be fulfilled by that and say, you know, am I doing the right thing here? Particularly we find that where people may be challenged by a piece of advice and they want to bring that to the table and discuss it. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why we have a compliance hotline for those questions, but also the formal piece as well. So you can certainly bring more pieces of advice to the table to discuss.
Great. And so then when we're talking about the overarching licensee obligations, you were saying that you've got the compliance at that level. Are you saying then that you provide templates for all their policies and so forth?
Yeah, we do. So this is helping the responsible managers be the best responsible managers that they possibly can be. Mm-hmm. Invariably, they're approaching us as great practitioners. Yeah. That doesn't necessarily mean that running a governance program is something they're really going to be excited about.
So, and running an advice business and being an advisor are two very different things. And then the third thing that you're adding that layer on is then running a license, which is totally different once again.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, from business owner, technician, to governance as well.
Mm.
So there's a lot of requirements that responsible managers need to fulfill. So our role is very much to make sure that you know what those are and break it down into bite-sized chunks. I think it's really easy to be overwhelmed, particularly when there's a high degree of legislative change. And if you try to consume it all at once, it's that old proverb about, you know, how do you get to know an elephant? You know, it's too much to take in all at once. Bite-sized chunks is probably more appropriate. So that's what our role is to break things into bite-sized, implementable chunks.
Great. I know one of my clients got their own license about 2 years ago, having been with a mid-tier licensee. And, you know, talking to them now, they're like, oh, I wish we had have done it years and years earlier. But in those first 3 months after they actually started trading under their own license, he was really challenged. He was losing sleep at night, and he was second guessing himself all the time around, you know, is there something happening on my watch that I don't know about? So I think, you know, it is important to be able to reach out to third-party professionals. I know that sometimes licensees like to perhaps exaggerate the difficulty in having your own license, but is there a difference in your support through that initial period when they first get their license versus maybe, you know, when they're a couple of years down the track?
It's a really good question and an interesting point, because I do try and paint the reality of having your own license.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work that you need to do. There's a lot of things that you are going to do yourself.
Yes.
And these are often things that the dealer group licensee would have done for you previously that perhaps you didn't realize how much you valued it.
Yes.
And so one of the biggest things, I think, is getting used to the governance framework, but there's everything else, you know, technology and how you've deployed that, dealing with the product providers who are now dealing with you directly and pivoting all of your code. So there's a lot of administrative work to do. And you pointed out, particularly in those first 3 months. So, and even prior to getting your license, ideally what you want to do is run that as a little bit of a project, have a couple of champions in your business. And this is where people in your business can stick up their hands and get excited about the transition to self-licensing. The reality of it is, a lot of people think, oh, it's going to be easier. It's not going to be easier. You're still doing the same things, plus you're running an AFSL. So you have to be really prepared for how much time that's going to take. And so in our early conversations with someone who's aspirationally looking for going self-licensed, we talk about the time impost, what you need to do, what you can outsource, so that you really have a good mindset about, okay, this is how I'm going to approach it. This is how I need to plan my time. Is it actually feasible?
Yeah, that's great. And I love how you are honest with people about that, because it's a massive decision for anybody to make in an advice business. And we're often chatting with advisors, you know, sometimes they're thinking the grass is greener on the other side. They're tired of, you know, having this compliance framework from a larger licensee. But I think it really is important that people do go into this with their eyes wide open and understanding what's going to be involved. Do you find that most firms, or do you recommend that most firms have an extra resource in the business, like someone whose role is specifically to oversee their compliance in-house?
Oh, not necessarily. I think it depends on size. I think there's a couple of ways to look at this. Is if you have multiple ARs, and I'm thinking more than 10, then you as the responsible manager, or ideally there'd be a couple of responsible managers, you're now responsible for the monitoring and supervision. So whilst you can outsource audit, the day-to-day look through that you need to have falls on your shoulders.
Yeah.
So if you're also a practitioner, then maybe that's not reality. And if you were doing something like, you know, I want to start vetting some of my advice files just to make sure I have peace of mind, you know, you could be spending X number of minutes per file and suddenly you've lost 2 days. So when you start getting of that scale and the volume of work might be too onerous for you if you're also trying to be a practitioner,
Mm.
then having someone in there in a compliance role, an oversight role or practice management role makes a lot of sense. For smaller boutiques, and I'm just going to draw a line here to say it's 5 advisors and they're all in the same office. Not necessarily, because there's live discussions happening about advice. So the look through is there, and then getting together with the compliance professionals on a quarterly basis, but knowing that you have them on tap if you need them, it is probably enough. The other way to look at this is also from an ASIC point of view. The larger you are, ASIC is going to expect certain levels of resources in your business, and they will interrogate, well, how many RMs are there? How are you going to monitor and supervise? Yes, you've got an external service, but is that enough? So it's a function of size, it's a function of roles and responsibilities. But I've seen smaller boutiques, and this is boutiques less than 10, do this incredibly well. And that's by having champions for different things. So there can be a champion for regulatory change, and they bring that to the table and say, did you know this was changing? Let's discuss it. These are those dynamic lunchtime meetings that we see as best practice.
Fantastic. It's also something that we see quite often with growing firms as well, that there's always a point at which they will benefit from having somebody that is not on the tools that's managing them, whether it be a practice manager, operations manager, whatever you like to call it. But at some point, it gets too unwieldy for the principal advisor, if they still have a full client book, to keep their hands on everything and provide the leadership and management that the business needs too. So I guess it's a very similar situation. Look, Andy, there's more things I want to drill into here, but I think I might take the opportunity to play one of your advisor testimonials. One of the key things, as most people will know by now, to be a provider member in the Iwf Alliance, we do put every provider through an amount of vetting that we can ensure that we maintain a level of quality of provider members that are in the system. And everyone needs to provide us 2 real-life human advisors that are happy to go on camera and talk about their experience. So why don't we listen to one of the advisors that have provided that for us? Why don't we listen to Tracy Edwards?
My name's Tracy Edwards, and I'm a director and senior advisor for First Advice Solutions. We have our own license, and we have 3 advisors and 3 support staff.
What services do you use from IOOF Alliances?
Well, yeah, look, we've really come on board with IOOF right from the beginning with Alliances, and of course working with Andy, who's very energetic and proactive in his role. Look, we've embraced doing the seminars, webinars, the PD days. We use them for discounts through some of the providers, so through Midwinter, through Morningstar, our PI and things like that, but also with Kinetic. So Kinetic is an aligned compliance company, and having our own license, it makes it, I guess, sometimes a little bit lonely and scary. You're out there by yourself. So being part of a group like IOOF Alliances and then being able to use Kinetic, we also pay extra to Kinetic to engage with them outside of the IOOF arrangement, which is really good for us. IOOF website is fantastic. They have a lot of documents and forms and registers, which we all must have when we have our own license. So we don't always use all of the documents, but we always refer to them because we know that they'll be very compliant, they'll have everything in them they need, and then we can use that knowledge when we're building our own.
How has working with IOOF Alliances helped your business?
I think it's made us more confident to go forward. So we've attended a couple of the conferences as well, which has been really good for us. So it's more of the broader IOOF group. But being part of that group and going through all of the different issues that you hear that both like firms with their own license and then firms that are under dealer groups have, you kind of come out the end going, well, everyone's got the same issues. So having that support of a group around you, I just don't know how you can have your own license and not have that supportive peer group around you, because it would be very hard, and it would just add to your workload. I don't want to be, I didn't particularly want to be running a license, and we do have someone here that does that. I want to be an advisor, and I want to be a really good engaged advisor with my clients. So having IOOF Alliances there means that I can do that much easier.
Would you recommend IOOF Alliances to other advisors?
Oh, absolutely. And look, give Andy a call. He's very approachable. Get involved in some PD days and just see how it feels. But I think you'll find that the benefits you get out of IOOF are, really fantastic and really can help you to drive your business and do what you do best without having to get bogged down in all that behind the scenes compliance stuff, which we've all been lumbered with at the moment.
Well, that's great. Tracy is obviously a great advocate of your services, Andy. Do you know how long Tracy and her business has been with you?
Yeah, Tracy's been with us for 3.5 years. They're fantastic to deal with. I think she's very reflective of the passion that our members have for their clients. Yeah. And so that's what drives them. That whole office, you walk in there, it feels like home, the welcome that you get. So, and there's so many offices like that we have. So they're small boutiques and they're doing what they do best, which is engage with their clients. And our role is very much to make sure that all the other things running their license, that they know where to access resources.
That's great. That's great. So a couple of the things that are just popping up for me that I know are big questions that a lot of advisors have when they're looking at a service such as yours. We've mentioned quite a few times about RMs. So do you guys provide specific RM training for people that are going to be responsible managers?
Yeah, we do. So we do run RM training programs. So there'll be series, there's a webinar, there's a face-to-face half day. So anything you'd expect to keep your RM points up to date and understand what your responsibilities are and keep on top of it, that's provided for you. So well and truly, you'd be accessing at least 8 points of RM content during the course of the year in some way, shape or form.
Fantastic. And what about technical advice strategies? Do you have any support around that space?
Now, this is the beauty of operating within IOOF. So you have all of those resources and capabilities at your disposal as well. So the Technical Connect team, so for technical advice strategies, is there for the use of Alliances members.
Great. Okay. What about education and CPD management for advisors?
Okay, so there's 3 layers. And I think Tracy was talking about it there. There are the main stage PD days and PD events that we tap into. They're provided by IOOF. So you get thought leadership days, you get fantastic quality speakers, really well worth seeing, that you just couldn't access the depth if you were out on your own or even within a small collective. Then you have what you'd expect in terms of your technical, your strategy, your legislative PD fare for you to consume. So that's covered in the main education curriculum. Then Alliances also runs peer groups and forums. Now, they will invariably be voted on in terms of the topics by our members. So we always do a pulse check and see what's top of mind for our members. And that could be anything from, yes, compliance interpretation, but it could be technology, it could be marketing, it could be advice strategies. So all of those things, business growth, and we'll create forums for them to participate in. And we'll either get experts or internal or external experts. We'll get people in to run those for us, and so they're professionally facilitated.
Fantastic. So one of my other questions, and you've almost answered it there already, was around community, because that is something that I think advisors do miss when they leave a licensee and they're self-licensed. You know, having that connection to other business owners and other advisors is so important.
Yeah, when you look at it and you think at it from a self-license, I always look at it from what do they utilise, because there's no point me having services that no one's using.
Yeah.
So I always like to look at, well, what's everyone using, and then asking them what are they using and getting value from. So absolutely, the compliance program is there. The education is really solidly utilised. The resources, and Tracy was talking about the portal basically that you get, so there's resources in there. But the community is what brings it all together. And these are the discussions. So all of these things can be discussed in those community get-togethers that we do have. So I think particularly when the community is looking at particular topics, then you're getting people jumping into those for those topics that they're interested in. And that keeps it really dynamic. And everyone's really engaging and sharing. And I think that's one thing you do notice, is that these businesses really do share when my role is just to facilitate the ability to get them together, and then everything just flows.
Yeah, fantastic. One of the things that I know really is helpful for advisors when they have a really scary time, if they have a client complaint, justified or otherwise. I know if you're part of a licensee, you have that support of the licensee stepping in on your behalf and helping you through that. Is there anything you do in that kind of instance?
Yeah, so there's a couple of layers here. So obviously there's a policy that will equip you with about how to handle complaints, which has your process in there.
Yeah.
So that is there to enable you to run and have an awareness of what you need to do. Now, it's all great to have a policy, but you do want someone's hand to hold when it happens.
Yeah,
and
yes.
so you pick up the phone, you call our hotline, you say, look, this has happened, we guide you through it. And invariably, most people can handle it there within their internal complaints process.
Mm-hmm.
If it's something that does escalate, well, then, yeah, we can be there to support and represent you if need be, but also to give you that ongoing advice about what are the next steps.
Great. Now, before I move away from that compliance support, I'm really keen to talk about this client engagement piece that you mentioned earlier, but I want to call out the elephant in the room. I know that there are a lot of advisors that when they're in a licensee, particularly if they're in a bigger licensee, a lot of the kind of language that we hear is that they get frustrated that they're having to comply with very onerous compliance management, and they feel like they're having to comply to the lowest common denominator because it's a big licensee and there are other firms in the license that aren't perhaps as higher quality as they might sense themselves to be. Is it possible that people have the perception that if it's IOOF Alliances, even though you've got your own license, that you're still going to be ruled with the same sized stick?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because we do get that question all the time, is like, well, what's the compliance program? Is it exactly the same? And I completely understand it from a large licensee. You're protecting the license, you have rigor in place, and often that rigor means that you're required to do things in a certain way at a certain time. So in self-licensing and working through IOOF Alliances, we like to think you have the best of both worlds, because we can look at what's happening in the licensees of IOOF to see what processes they're deploying, what policies and templates they're utilising. But we deliberately 4 years ago made the decision that to deploy self-license solutions in terms of compliance, we need to have self-license experts who have a more agnostic view. We're all operating under the same law and the same regulations. It's all about interpretation.
Yeah.
And it's the philosophy of your deployment. And so therefore, yes, you do have flexibility in the way you gather data, you store data, where you store it. We're not mandating a system that you need to use. That's a decision for you to make. The look and feel of your SOA is a decision for you to make. We're here to guide you about, well, these are the guardrails of the law. Let's look at what you can do within those guidelines in the way that you want to represent yourself to clients.
That's great. Thank you. So a very quick sideways step. You mentioned earlier that you're also very keen around client engagement. What do you do in that space?
Oh, anything and everything. It's anything from what conversations could I be having in the language that we could be framing up. So that's soft skills. It's designing your value proposition. It's all of those things. But it also is to what's the experience we want to have, and how are we going to deploy that experience? Does that need technology? Are there different tools that we can build into our stack? So it is a fluid and never-ending discussion, which evolves with the way that advice evolves and the way that clients evolve. And it's very individual. And, some people drawing a picture in front of a client on a whiteboard is their bread and butter, and it's what works for them. And for other people, it's like, well, I want to tap into giving clients a digital experience. So the client engagement piece is something that is a constantly evolving discussion, and our role in it is to facilitate the discussion.
That's great. All right, now, $1 million question, Andy, how do you charge?
So we have packages and we have modules. So there is a modular approach, but there's some core packages that we put together. So whilst we do tailor everything for each individual business on the elements that they want to adopt, there are some packages that are just tickets to the game, if you like, in terms of our base membership packages, which give you access to all of the resources that we've talked about, particularly the compliance service as well.
Okay, so can you give us a bit of a feel? Because I know cost is often, we tend to hear that there's two drivers for people really wanting to get their own license. Cost is usually a large influencer, and then there's also, of course, that freedom and flexibility of maintaining their own license. So it is always the big question on everyone's minds, and they will always be comparing it, first of all, to the cost of staying with the licensee that they're with, and then potentially the alternatives that they have out there in the market. So for a typical firm, can we get a rough rule of thumb? Let's say you've got 3 advisors. What would we be looking at?
Yeah, so most of the costs are at the AFSL level. So for what we provide, compliance program, so AFSL governance, the AR monitoring and supervision, so audit, education program, and portal with all of the resources, which includes research, technical, templates, those sorts of elements. If you package that all up, for 3 advisors, you're looking at mid-40s, so let's say 46,000.
Right. Okay. All right. And I believe you, well, of course, I know, here's my Dorothy Dixer, I know you're giving a special offer to Evolve Alliance members, aren't you? Can you tell us about that?
We are. Look, I mean, for across all of our packages, we're looking at a 10% discount there for Evolve Alliance members, and that certainly assists, particularly early on in your stages of getting your own license.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Now, I have obviously seen lots and lots of different offers out there in the marketplace when advisors are trying to compare. And I do thank you, because I know I did put you on the spot there. I know it varies with the size of business and what services they're using. But some firms might say, oh, actually, 45 grand a year, that's quite expensive. Certainly not when you compare it to licensee costs right now, but it may be expensive to alternatives. What would you say in that space?
Yeah, so there's lots of different offers out there in terms of provision for self-licensed businesses. And what I typically find, if you're comparing apples to apples, and I think what the difference is with us is, yes, we'll give you templates, but we'll also roll up the sleeves and help you do it. So part of the real differentiating piece for us in that package that I've just described is running quarterly compliance committee meetings for you, being the independent chair on that committee, completing all the minutes and doing a report back, interrogating a piece of advice. So essentially think of that as an annual AFSL audit but broken down into quarterly chunks so that you're always got that peace of mind that you're doing the right things in your business. And how that is contrast to other offers, that service isn't there. There's definitely a suite of tools and maybe a once a year check-in, but not that rigorous process. So that's the main core difference and where you find some pricing differential.
Lovely. Thanks, Andy. And you know, as with everything, it's one of the reasons why we have a range of different provider members in the Evolve Alliance, because we know there's not one single perfect solution that will solve every challenge for every business. So being able to compare apples with apples is so critically important. One last thing before we go, PI insurance. Do you help in that space? And what are we talking about? Because we know the cost of that is continuing to rise and it's getting more difficult to access.
Absolutely, we do help. Now, it is a hard market. There's only a certain finite limit of money available for self-licensed businesses. And as a consequence, the insurers that are remaining are becoming very discerning about who they offer this to. And invariably, you get a pretty good idea of when they don't want to offer it because the premiums are astronomical.
Yes.
It's all about the quality of the proposal and a few really important touch points: quality and robustness of your APL and APL process, quality and robustness of your compliance process. So we've become very familiar, very close to the PI insurers that have an appetite in this space. And we've made them very familiar and very comfortable with the resources that we provide in AFSL for their APL and its rigor, and for the compliance program. And consequently, what we're finding is we're getting better outcomes than had you not had those elements in place.
Good to know. Good to know. Thank you, Andy. So look, thank you so much for your time today. For those advisors who are wanting to reach out and love what they've heard today and they want to explore a little bit more about accessing your services, how's the best way for them to do that?
Oh, look, best way is drop me a line. It's just simple. It's andy.marshall@iwf.com.au. And look, my role is for you as a business owner to make the best choice for you and your family and your clients. That may not be self-licensing. That may not be doing it through me. My whole idea and ideal is to have you make a great choice for you and what you want to achieve.
Yeah, and Andy, I've known you personally for many years now, and I absolutely attest that I know that's exactly the kind of human that you are. You will always be ensuring that the advisors make the best choice for their circumstances. So once again, thank you so much. For those of you who are Evolve Alliance members and you're wanting to access your special discount for being part of the Alliance, simply log on to your Evolve Alliance portal, find the IOOF Alliances page within the provider member section, and there'll be a special discount code there for you. And of course, we just do some cross checks. Andy will ensure that you're a current member in order to access that discount off services. Once again, Andy, thank you so much for all the support that you provide advisors.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you.